So, good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of Planning and Highways Committee. And the first thing I need to tell you is that this meeting is being recorded for publication on the Thatcham Town Council YouTube channel. So, the second thing I'm going to do is to propose that we adjust the agenda so that we move straight into the discussion on the local plan review and deal with the admin afterwards. If that's okay with people. Yeah. I'm sure it's okay with the three people sitting at the end of the table.
With the exception of declarations.
Oh, declarations of interest we need to do, yes. So declarations of interest. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. In the event that education should come up, I am Chairman of Directors of the Council of the Capital Trust.
Should we do apologies? Oh, we need to do apologies, yes. So, Deputy Clerk.
Yeah, so apologies received from Councillor Boyd and Councillor Dillon, with Mike Cole substituting and Councillor Walker.
And I think there was a WhatsApp message from Councillor Louise Cotton as well. That may not have gone. It may not be on.
Not on here.
Oh, she's not on that group. Okay, so let's find it.
That's not like an interest. I've got a chest of cough and cold, so I'll be blubbering a bit. Apologies for that.
Okay. Thank you. So moving on to Regulation 19 consultation. I don't know how you'd like to play it. If it might be helpful if you could start by giving us your sort of overview of how you see North East Thatcham sort of taking a step back from the legalese and the regulatory language of the consultation as to what your vision is of what it will entail, if that's possible. And if either of you are able to do that.
Can I just say, should we mention that it's been delayed as well in case
It's been
delayed as well.
what meeting?
No,
Oh yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. So I'll come on to that here in a minute. That question was about the timing of the consultation, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Well, you're familiar with the issue. You may not be able to give us the answer just yet, but actually, would you like to start with that and say what the status is for maybe for people who aren't here but might be watching?
Yeah, I mean, as we released publicly, unfortunately, we weren't able to write that. So we were practicing this issue. What we've got, we've had team who unfortunately sick. Those team members are focused on doing a particular part of the evidence space. So now that the other team members are what they're focused on, they've now repurposed the team. We're looking at how long that's going to take. It's very joint, it's the Xtrac in terms of getting that information in the one place. And we look to be able to confirm that in the future time the most timetable for the procedure to start. We will inform people as soon as we can that start date. Fortunately, we might be able to provide advice prior to that, which we kind of work for the solution. It's all about
it sounds like you're not yet certain that you'll meet the suggestion on the website that for the end of this week.
We'll come back as soon as we're able to. The key thing is consultation is still happening. So the statutory period, but yourselves.
Just moving the mic a bit.
Yeah.
Now, we just move it over to the other table.
Well, we just lost that one, so we just need to pull this table out a bit.
Congratulations. I've never seen that before.
They are then fairly soft as well, so I won't try these voices.
Okay.
No,
should that be? You're going to move that one a bit further then, because I couldn't speak up. So just watch Gables and David. It's going to be an interesting section of the video, isn't it? The chairman climbing underneath the table. But anyway, I don't think that's contrary to standing orders. Okay.
Yeah. Finishing off, so in terms of the constitution itself, it will still go themselves usual less to engage in the process. It's changed.
Mhm.
What we're going to do is, that we follow the delegations that are set within the council reports, and that we consult as we should do in terms of full documentation. So that's what I think is the highest
Okay, thank you. So are you able to sort of give an overview of how you see North East Thatcham in sort of non-planning language, as it were? Because is that you able to do that, Brian?
It has set out directly in the policy up to, and I'll be careful now because I keep on saying 15,000, 1,500 houses over the plan period, with a significant open space to the northwest, running around the north of the site and coming down to the east of the site. That would provide, I believe, in the region of between 5 and 7 miles of additional public open space and public footpaths. If you want to loop around the site, it's around about 7 miles. If you just want to walk from one bit to the other, it's about 5 miles. And that would be spread out to be determined later on through the design and master planning phase.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll turn to councillors who would like to start with some questions. I'm guessing Councillor. Oh, I'll start with Councillor Woodham because he was quick off the mark.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You, as I always say, for saying that you'll correct me if it's the wrong time to ask this particular question. But you may remember that we had a meeting at the Regency Park Hotel, and I was just about to ask you, before the interrupted, very gently ask you, does this development provide a bus service? And if so, which direction might bus service go? Or is it too early to ask?
It is too early to ask for that specific detail, but it would be subject to active travel. It would be subject to our desire within our travel and our statement of environmental strategy to reduce carbon. So yes, a bus travel would be provided, and it would be Jenny Graham's team working with the details with the developers if the proposal was accepted by the examiner at the local plan.
Thank you. And
Could I just follow up on that, because the master plan, both the master plan, that's a stage 3 study, and the traffic study, the one by WSP, explicitly include a bus service as part of the traffic management. So in effect, that is a sort of my understanding is that that's effectively almost a precondition on the viability of the plan.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
And Chairman, may I submit another one?
Yes.
Selected. I understand currently the parking capacity at Thatcham Station is basically overflowing. We can't see at the moment any additional parking being made available on the back of this development. I've no doubt that a lot of people probably either cycle or even walk down to Thatcham Station, but some will they don't want to take cars. We don't know we're addressing it.
My understanding is that there is no provision at the moment for any increased parking at Thatcham Town Railway Station, and there is no provision in the infrastructure delivery plan for that. That would normally have come through the transport plan that is subject to another team, but certainly that is the sort of thing that in your representations, if you wish to see the provision of enhanced capacity at the railway station, that is the sort of thing that you should be putting into your Reg 19 responses.
And Chairman, finally, if I may,
Yeah.
then also include some form of investigation, shall we say, into any additional capacity parking in Thatcham Town Centre. Because currently the centre, I can see the response. The centre's absolutely chockers, and the very small car parks relevant on the wings that shows that the outside is pretty full. But I think a response is due.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things here. One is there's certain levels of detail that we're putting within the plan process. And the planning applications come in to detailed transport assessment, there's the next level of detail. So along the local plan, the policy will say this, there's still opportunity for additional things to go through based on really detailed impact assessments. So that's just to say that's a caveat that might still be other things coming in, but also the developers may argue against things that are in at the moment because the transport assessment technical evidence still some application stage, releases by otherwise. That said, the council should be consulting on the next local transport plan spring this year, which will help in terms of active station. Car parking plus cycle about the town qualities for that, so that should be at least give you another argument to asking those questions there. The other thing is the work that's currently going on to do from the economy side, which is the consultation notice to pay. That's again the stress can be picked up. So there's different areas with those comments can be picked up. And we can look at things in terms of look holistic vision, the town centre, the town as a whole, linked into northeast Thatcham in the longer term. So it won't be forgotten. There's different routes we use to make points in different areas where we can pick up the detail of these points.
Thank you both for your responses.
So moving on to Councillor Lister then.
So thanks, Chair. Can I come back to the numbers? Because I'm still struggling a little bit to be clear, given that there's different numbers quoted in different documents and evidence databases and so forth. So I just want to be clear on a few things, and I'll just read that as I understand it, and then you can tell me whether I have this correct. So the policy, SP17 for Thatcham North East, it brings forward the same site as Regulation 18, with the same settlement boundary, and it states that will build on the guiding principles of Thatcham Strategic Road Study. And that study is all about delivering 2,500 houses. That's the number one conclusion from that study. From what I can see, there's nothing in Regulation 19 Policy SP17 that limits the number of houses either within or beyond the plan period to 1,500. The supporting text in Regulation 19, Policy SP17, states that there will be delivery of at least 1,500 dwellings in the plan period, which is a lower threshold, not an upper limit. And the Policy SP12 states that the target figure is 538 dwellings per annum, but that does not constitute a ceiling or cap to development. So again, there's no limits on what can come forward. The accompanying vision statement in the evidence base describes up to 1,800 dwellings might be delivered in the plan period, with a further 700 afterwards, taking the total up to 2,500. So once this policy SP17 is presented to the inspector and it becomes, or if it becomes accepted and becomes policy, in my view, it seems to give a developer to come forward the opportunity to propose 2,500 houses, either within or beyond the plan period. So my question is my understanding correct? Is the settlement boundary the same as Regulation 18? Am I correct that there's no upper limit on the number of houses other than 2,500, which is enshrined in the policy in the TSGS, the Thatcham Strategic Growth Study?
The easiest one to start off with is settlement boundary. The settlement boundary stops at Floral Way, and the settlement boundary will only be changed following the examination, and therefore be part of the examination process to determine what the northern, if I can put it that way, limit of the settlement boundary would be. Because what the policy says, there will be significant public open space and a public park to the north of the development. Between that and Barnsley Lane. Assessment on the ridge.
Bucklebury.
Thank you.
Bucklebury to be precise.
So that is when that settlement boundary will be set. In terms of an upper limit, the local plan is between now and 2039, and the proposal is only for 1,500 dwellings. Maybe for myself now.
Yes.
It is perfectly within the rights of anybody making responses to the consultation to turn around and propose an additional number. Thatcham Town Council can go lower, developers can go higher. It will be for the inspector to sort that out. In terms of the various documents were prepared at various stages. So at the start of the first document, the David Lock study was looking at 2,500. Then when the NPPF came in and the visioning work was commissioned in 2021, what the consultants were doing there in terms of the 1,800, it was 1,800 in the plan period and then 700 after the plan period, because the NPPF was saying if you're going to have developments over to beyond the local plan, you had to do the visioning exercise. And that was new in the changes made in 2021. So that is why that document says 1,800 and 700. But this is the key thing. The issue is what the local plan review says and policy SB 17. That is the document that matters. The other stuff is just supporting that conclusion. And it said in the David Loxley, yes, you can do 2,500 if you wish. There is this issues. Then you've now got the visioning said, well, you can do 1,800 now. If you need to, you can push that out later on. But the SP 17 said it is only 1,500 in the plan period, and the settlement boundary will be set by that examination. Now, in terms of going forward, it is perfectly acceptable for any local authority or any planning office to turn around and review settlement boundaries. We did so in 2010, and we said Thatcham had significant growth up to in the last local plan. So the plan that was the core strategy said no, Thatcham was going to be left alone. We know that we're going to get changes in the planning system. We don't know when, but they are going to happen. So it is possible that, yes, Thatcham, the settlement boundary could expand even further, or it is equally possible that the settlement boundary could remain where it is fixed this time round in the local plan and never change again because of other policies.
Could I ask before you do it about this question about the settlement boundary, because the proposal is that the settlement boundary will cover I think in the document is the current documentation is it will cover the full area that has been put forward. That's the area in the master plan, and there has the consultation on that was private. It was only open to parish councils. So what would be the process for determining the settlement boundary and aligning that, for example, with the housing density and the spatial strategy?
So the settlement boundary review is part of the evidence base for this document, together with all the methodology, and that is now subject to the examination. So all the proposed changes that were made in the settlement boundary review, having consulted with all of the parish councils, is now subject to the consultation of this Reg 19 and will be subject to the examination. And so it will be for the inspector to decide whether those settlement boundary review proposals are acceptable or not.
So can I come back? Because if they're not, how would the inspector how would he be capable of proposing an alternative?
Because the alternative would have been presented to him as part of the Reg 19 consultations and responses from the various parties, both from parish councils, individuals, and developers.
Yeah.
This question, is the evidence
submitted to examination, plus the examination process.
Yes.
The inspector will report back to the council with proposed modifications made on later, and then those modifications, he or she may have a view with a set of factors, which the council decide how to take those modifications forward. I would then themselves within the examination process, inspector will consider that if they've just submitted to the team process, and then the hearings and evaluation, and then it goes back and forth through that process. Then he or she will come to you, draft the report, send the report to the council will consider that report, and within that report will be lots of potential modifications of various things.
So just finally, does that from that implies that perhaps Thatcham Town Council should put forward a specific proposal for a settlement boundary, or if there were,
it's not for us to tell you.
I know, but
it's good to see others when we do that.
Yeah.
So you need to consider what's appropriate.
Okay.
For you to do.
Okay. Big task of 6 weeks.
Councillor Dillon has also raised his hand.
Okay. Go over to Councillor Dillon. I should have mentioned for those recording that Councillor Dillon is in attendance, but is not physically present, and that's because he is having to multitask between 2 meetings. So, Councillor Dillon.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm going to stay off video. I'm in West Berkshire Council offices, but I'm tethering to my phone, so the signal's not great. I just wanted, Brian, you mentioned the previous local plan, and I think that local plan said Thatcham would be allowed time for its infrastructure to catch up with development. And so, from a planning perspective, are you confident that Thatcham has caught up with its infrastructure needs since the last plan, and what were those infrastructure needs, and how have they been met?
The 2010 core strategy said exactly that. The work that has been done to support the local plan review 2022 to 2039 includes a detailed report from David Lock Associates on the infrastructure, past, present and future. And the current IDP that is proposed states a significant amount of additionality in terms of infrastructure. Northeast Thatcham, for example, includes the provision for a dedicated healthcare facility. And forgive me, I forget the exact wording, but it's to deal with the Berkshire and Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire NHS Trust or subsequent body should they change it yet again. For that provision, there is education provision on Northeast Thatcham. So given the information that has been provided to us, I would turn around and say, yes, the infrastructure delivery plan as proposed does contain significant infrastructure for Thatcham to enable it to catch up, if that is the right terminology.
Well, so I mean, and that's the hub of the Brian, is that we were allowed time to catch up with infrastructure. From the planning point of view, between the last plan and this plan, did we catch up with our infrastructure needs? Or are we saying that actually we need this new development to finally get us to our infrastructure needs?
I don't think that the piecemeal development that has gone in Thatcham, resulting in turf and section 106 and community infrastructure levy, has been sufficient to say, for example, provide the education need that Thatcham has long desired, or the town council has long desired, for example. And this proposal would sort out some of that requirement.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'll leave it for there, Chairman. Just because Brian mentioned the local plan, the previous one, so I wanted just to come in on that point. I've got some other points, but I think they may come out later in debate.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll pass back to Councillor Lister.
Thanks. And just to sort of give an overview, I'll come back to infrastructure as well, Councillor Dillon. But before I do that, can we just go back to the numbers? There's a few things I'm still not quite happy with the way that's been described. You said SP17, the policy is what counts. So what's in front of us in SP17 is what counts. Now, I think you've been dismissive of the TSGS because you're saying it's a supporting document, but it's part of SP17 policy. It's the opening paragraph. It states that the guiding principles of the TSGS form the policy. It's in the policy. And that policy, therefore, is structured around the 2,500 proposed sites. So I'm still not quite convinced that 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, if a new developer comes forward, he won't just present us with this policy or the council or West Berkshire and say, look, within SP17, it states that it will bring forward 2,500 houses. So can we come back to that? Secondly, you said that it won't bring forward more than 1,500 houses in the planned period. That's not what the policy states. The policy states that we'll deliver at least 1,500 houses in the planned period. It's a lower threshold. There's nothing to cap the number of houses that come forward. So I don't think it's correct to say it will deliver 1,500. The correct statement is that it will deliver at least 1,500 houses. That's what the policy states. And again, you say the settlement boundary will come back from the inspector, which, okay, it will be debated and so forth. But currently, there's a map in SP17, which is the same map as the Regulation 18 site boundary. So we are talking about the same sites going forward to the inspector. If, regardless of whether or not it's debated that it comes back smaller after inspection, but it is the same site. And there's no limit on the number of dwellings in the policy that can come forward. So
Perhaps I can start. Let's give the intention of the policy. Feel that that's a piece simply dialogue with inspectors. I'm sure the inspector questions the ones that planning authority about the potential of a great number of policies across it. We have to respond to the inspection on that basis. If you feel it's not strong enough or robust enough to limit it to 1,500 or whichever figure you're looking for, again, that's something that you could consider putting into the inspector. It's not for us to change that now, because when the consultation starts, really what we're doing is collating the responses from council teams, categorising them and submitting them to the inspector. We have little or no ability to change what's in there. So I take the point, understanding Brian's given the view of the intention. If the policy isn't explicit enough for you, then I'd certainly invite you to give thought to what we want to say to the inspector on that point.
okay, maybe we can come back to that later, Chair. Can I move on to
Could I ask one question there? Because the area that is needed for the development is dependent on the density of housing. And that is set by the spatial strategy, or there may be other policies in there. I don't recall in the SP17 it's saying which of the categories applies to North East Thatcham. Because that obviously determines the number of houses, and the density of housing determines how much area of land is needed to support that. David, do you know if that, Councillor Lister, do you know if that was in there? I'm pretty sure.
So, sorry, Chair.
The density of housing.
The density of housing is a separate policy.
Yeah, but there needs to be a link. The question is that the spatial strategy has set different densities for different categories of area.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which category of area applies to this development.
No, and that's one of the issues, is because the site, it's exactly the point, because the site boundary is not changed, and there's already a policy in there that says this is the number of houses that will be expected on undeveloped lands or green land. I can't see any way in which a developer will not eventually come forward and say, your policies tell me it's land for 2,500 houses, you've got the density in another policy, and it's fully justified for them to control the 2,500 houses. I see no limits on them coming forward with anything less than that.
I suppose the way to turn it away from North East Thatcham, Summerford Park, 2010 said 2,000 dwellings. It's come forward for 1,500. We can turn around and say this is what we wish. The developers will turn around and say something else. There will be, because of the scale of the development and the time frame, who knows where we're going to be after the plan period? Who knows what the mortgage market is going to be? Are we going to be in another recession? This plan is looking forward to 2039. If we look back over the last 12 years, we've come out of one recession, we've left Europe, we've gone into another recession. The plan will be changed, planning policy has to be updated every 5 years. National policy has changed constantly. We now know that there's going to be another NPPF. We now know the government is proposing to change stuff, but they haven't changed it yet. There is no such thing as the certainty that you are looking for. All I can say is that the policy has been written to give as much certainty as we can, given the current circumstances in which we are operating.
Chair, can I just ask you clarification? Right, I think the bulk of the policy was always one text. There's a statement that talks about the stage development.
Master plan in conjunction with
So in terms of to try and give more comfort to us all, because we can't say yes.
Yeah.
The idea is development that works in partnership with the council and stakeholders. So it works in conjunction with others to develop at the next level of detail. And through that process, the numbers, the areas, the locations of different densities should all be developed in more detail when it's developed. Then you have to remember what the developers are doing. They're seeking to secure an application. The next stage is then working the next level of detail. This is standard work we're doing. The next level of detail down in your planning application, and another level of detail down in it. So as detail gets greater as you go down in depth, more and more. There's a certain amount of flexibility that we need. We wouldn't tie in certainty through the master planning processes prior to applications.
Councillor Dillon.
Councillor Dillon again.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So one is on housing numbers, one's on the settlement boundary. So in planning terms, I believe, Brian, the strategic gap doesn't exist anymore as a legal piece. So how would you be able to advise us to advocate for a type of strategic gap between Thatcham and Bucklebury in our response?
You're quite correct. There is no such thing as a strategic gap. We did do an additional piece of work on green spaces, looking at whether or not there should be a green belt or extension policy, and that is proposing a number of gaps, especially between Thatcham and Newbury, for example. But it concluded that there was not a need for a gap between Bucklebury and Thatcham. That does not mean to say that you cannot propose one. You might want to turn around and say that if North East Thatcham was to go ahead, the strategic park should be that part of that gap.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And then the next one is, so just before the decision came to full council at West Berkshire, there was a statement from Michael Gove on annual house targets. And was any consideration given by officers in regards to that statement and then the total number of houses designed in this current plan period?
The statement from Michael Gove was on the 5th of December and the council meeting was on the 1st of December.
Yes, sorry, yes.
So the simple answer to your question is no, because we didn't know what Michael Gove was going to say.
And now that he said it, Brian, does it fundamentally change West Berkshire Council's position?
No, and one of the reasons for it is the government says it will review the implications for the standard method on new household projections data based on the 2021 census, which is due to be published in 2024. And the important thing here is that it is not proposing any changes to the standard method of formula itself through the consultation. So that's the first thing. So the government is not changing the 513 dwellings per annum that it says West Berkshire should be providing. That is a government starting point for any changes that come forward.
Okay, but the standard method incorporates an uplift for urban local authorities in the top 20 most populated cities and urban centres as well.
Correct.
So, and has Reading falls into that top 20, I believe, does it?
It does. It's number 20.
So in terms of our obligations of working with neighbouring planning authorities, are they taking their 20% uplift?
They are taking a 20% uplift. At this precise moment in time, the 513 dwellings per annum does not include an additional 20% for the urban area of Reading.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any other questions, but I'd be really interested in hearing the answer to the education question.
I was going to move on. I was going to move on to that. I think we've probably got as far as we can on the numbers, and I think Councillor Lister, you wanted to.
Yeah, I was going to come on to the education. Yeah, so thanks for the numbers. I think we just need to reflect on that in terms of, on the one side there's an intent, but at the end of the day, we just have to consult on the policy that's in front of us. So please understand where we're coming from. We don't know any background discussions. We can just go on what's in front of us. And from my perspective, it looks the same as Regulation 18. You know, to people on that policy, SP 17.
Except that Regulation 18 envisaged 1250 housing in the first plan period.
Exactly, and I don't know, if you work. We mentioned this in the last meeting in December, and you said we're going to provide a written response to the Town Council about the explanation for why the number of houses has gone up in Regulation 19. It's gone up from 1,250 to at least 1,500 in Regulation 19. I don't know, before we move off the numbers, would you like to comment on that? Yeah.
The answer we set out in our SEA on page 38. The option was considered by the 2,500 was considered in light of the responses received to the Reg 18 not too high. The council has considered to reduce the number of dwellings, which still enables a strategic level of development, which can provide on-site community facilities. It is noted that compared to the higher number of dwellings, the option may not deliver all the education provision originally envisaged at the site, or the additional improvements to the community infrastructure. In other words, in order to get the level of viability on the site, to provide the infrastructure requirements, to provide the 40% affordable housing, to provide all the SIL, etc., and the net zero carbon development, it was felt that 1,500 houses in total would still enable the site to be viable, and the whole plan viability work supported that assessment.
Yeah, that's an answer to a slightly different question that you're saying. So the question I addressed to Mr. Owens was Regulation 18 said a minimum of 1,250. This is a minimum of 1,500.
So in the Regulation 18 was talking about a site of 2,500 houses in total, and all the infrastructure to be provided and associated with that. By reducing the number of houses, because the 2,500 Regulation 18 drew an awful lot of responses, but still to provide a level of infrastructure provision that Thatcham was identified as needed in Thatcham. The 1,500 still provides that whole plan viability in order to deliver some of that infrastructure and still get everything else we wanted.
Okay. Can I move on to infrastructure?
And move on to
Education.
particularly, yes.
So you made some important points for the infrastructure will still be brought forward. And I'm asking these numbers, by the way, because I'm trying to piece everything together to understand how to interpret related documents. We talk about the, it might be probably the most pressing issue of Thatcham is the secondary school provision. For many years, it's been widely accepted by West Berkshire Council that Kennington's building capacity. That was a joint statement at Xtrac acquired 3 or 4 years ago. When I looked at Thatcham strategic growth study, there was provision in there for secondary school. There was a viability study. It had a cost in there, an estimated cost of £26 million for secondary school, and the developer would make a 50% contribution. That was then refined further through the IDP, the Infrastructure Delivery Plan. It was updated in 2021. In October 2021, that figure increased to £48 million. So I assume that somewhere presented on the background, and we'd come up with a new estimate based on the requirements for 6 to 8 forms of entry for secondary school. That was okay. The new IDP, and bear in mind that these documents, Chair, have only come out in the last 3 or 4 days, so we're still playing catch up, and we might got some of this wrong. But the new infrastructure delivery plan that's now published for January, and it just came out in the last week or so, it only has a £5 million entry for the entire secondary school provision in the infrastructure delivery plan for Newbury and Thatcham. Now, that to me implies that there is no secondary school coming forward on the site because it's not part of infrastructure any longer within the plan period. And I can't work out what the process is going from the 26 million to 48 million to effectively removing, as far as I can tell, the secondary school provision for Thatcham. So would you like to provide some commentary to those numbers?
I would have to say it's the cost of land, because what we say in the current version of the SP17 is that the land will be provided by the developer. If the land is being provided by the developer, there is no cost to the local authority for the land. A figure of 48 million would suggest that the land provision is being bought from the developer, and the provision of 26 million that you said there is the 50-50 with the developer. So I would say, I haven't spoken to our education colleagues, that is why that there is a variation in the prices.
So
We'll check it out.
yeah, I mean, surely the way to be in a consistent way, it implies to me it started off with TSGS Regulation 18 that the developer would contribute to the land and the bill costs. It wasn't just the land, it was the bill costs as well. I think what you're implying now is that 40 million is the cost to the council for acquiring the land, but now it's no longer required. But who's funding the school? How's this looking forward?
So under planning, we are only able to ask a developer for the funding associated with that development. We are not able to ask a developer to pay for an existing deficiency. Now, where we are currently with the SP17 is we're asking the developer to provide land, and then it would be up to the council and other funding mechanisms to build that school. Because on 1,500 dwellings, you're not going to get the same pupil yield as you were going to get on a 2,500 development. As a result of that, the education colleagues have said what they have said in the policy. So that's the reason. But we'll go away and get the education formally back.
Could I just ask at that point, a very quick internet search, I discovered a document called Securing Developer Contributions for Education, published by the Department for Education, but it is linked from the section 106 page on the Department for Levelling Up. So I'm wondering if that which gives some ideas for funding of education, if that's been taken into account.
What date is that, Doctor?
2019, but I took it off the internet within days.
Again, it would be up to our education colleagues to advise us accordingly, because the Department for Education changes its funding regime and its funding.
This is talking about the planning measures, the measures in planning policy to implement.
Yeah, it would be for our education colleagues to to talk to us about their costs and their needs.
Okay, okay. Councillor Cole.
Can I ask one slightly wider question? It's something that's been some time. You said, Brian, that we can't ask the developer to fund an existing deficiency. But the whole premise of having a development of this size was to start to address some of the infrastructure shortfalls that Thatcham has. So it puzzles me as to how you can do that if the only thing you can ask the developer for is effectively to fund what is going to flow from that development.
The easiest way to answer that is that a developer could build a single story secondary school and the council could pay for the first floor extension. The developer is paying for the needs associated with his development, and by building the additionality, the first floor extension, for example, the council is then paying for the existing deficiency.
Right. So the development itself, the size of this development, is not in itself going to provide anything towards Thatcham's shortfall, current shortfall.
It is
In
providing
infrastructure provision, it only provides that which is. So you're then looking to the council then
there's a
to provide the rest. No?
for example. Previously, after a few again, how do you deal with existing deficiencies? Communicating well with accommodating housing. You look at the site-based infrastructure, it says the council or education authority could find funding to help deal with existing deficiencies or enhance the budget. Things like increased parking, cycle parking, footpaths connectivity, bus provision that are required from development, and the benefit of actually providing additional capacity. So when you provide a footpath, and the footpath is there, and you provide good cycle links are there, if they would be provided to the same centre, so on. Additional bus services would benefit towns as a whole, because anyone across that route can use that to access this. So this is additionality provided. Leading on authorities ask the developer to mitigate the impact from their schemes. Developers are very good at identifying what their impacts are, then negotiating with the planning authority how to pay to deal with them. So it's fairly complicated subject, like Brian said, it's really the additionality of like you want to infrastructure overcome the efficiency. The driver can't need to overcome the efficiency of the place.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Cole for you.
Just thank you. You're starting to clarify my own little brain. Just asking another supplementary if I could. So if I take 10 schools as an example, the site at Kennet is modularly developed. As we speak, as Brian said, there's been a piece of development over the years. So if there was another school to be built on the new site, bearing in mind that the Department for Education says that the secondary school has to run 1,200 pupils for it to be viable. As far as I can see, 1,500 houses would provide 400 or 500 secondary pupils, depending on the density and on the style of housing that's going to be developed. There would then, therefore, from what you say, be a reliance on additional money coming in from West Berkshire Council or any other source to actually build a larger school on that site, or shift schools and use the existing site or whatever is decided. That money would have to come separately from the developer. So if in that case, you've got either a small school which is unviable, or relying on additional money coming in from West Berks, which, as we know, is not exactly sloshing around with loads of cash behind. So I still can't quite see how the new development is actually going to deal with any shortfall in either education or leisure centre or any other part of the shortfall in infrastructure that we already have. Please enlighten me.
Brian wrote it as well. In part, I don't think it was envisaged that in 2,500 to pay for the whole secondary school itself. So there was always the requirement for additional funding to come in to develop a secondary school. Now, what the current option allows is flexibility in terms of how that sites. That'll be something to work through. But the most physics again, different model elsewhere. That's the discussions with the education department for the farm. They will want to deliver for they will ensure that the education strategy also is clear.
Greatest thing they're providing is the land. To be perfectly blunt about it, is the land. The hardest thing around Thatcham is to provide land. Here we've got a proposal that has identified a piece of land. It has identified that there is education provision needed. It's identified that there is playing pitch provision needed. There's public space provision needed. And in order to facilitate all of that, it is proposed that 1,500 dwellings are built on that land.
But again, sorry to labour this point, I get back to my point that if the developer is only providing that land to cover the requirements of that development.
No. The negotiation is for what we have said. The negotiation is for to set out what we have said for primary school provision and for secondary school provision. So that is the negotiation part. And we have agreed that that is what should be provided.
If I just come in on that, because the policy SB 17 effectively there's two primary schools which would basically service that area, so they are fully within it. As far as the SB 17 regulation 19, the only thing it says is land. It doesn't say how much or what capacity of school it is intended to provide.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I've got policy here. Let me just read out.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Spotty checks have the same questions, and I fully understand in regards to this. The development 1,500 houses cannot provide all the land and do everything. It can do what it can to offset those developments. That's one of the principles. But we have to make sure that there's sufficient land to effectively make a school, a secondary school, viable, and that is going to mean bringing together tenants and the new demand from this new site into a new school. So it's going to be a very large, substantial school. And I think in TSGS it took about 6 to 8 forms of entry to the secondary school. Now, it comes back to this, I don't know how to read this policy any longer, because is that one of the guiding principles that's embedded in ST 17? Because it refers to another consultant's report. The raw text in ST 17 doesn't mention the area of lands, as the chairman just stated. It's the secondary provision, lands to meet the impact of the development. What does that mean? Does that mean 2 forms of entry, and therefore a much smaller footprint of area with not the same planning pitch provision? And to interpret that as 6 or 8 forms of entry, it goes on to say the nature and cost of the mitigation will be informed by a feasibility study undertaken at the applicant's expense. I don't really understand why that needs to be part of the policy. Yet there's nothing in here about the developer contributions to actually delivering the school and building the school and financing it. I think that's the more pressing issue, not doing the feasibility study at the applicant's expense. But what's the Section 106 obligations that would be on the developer to deliver the school and to be specific about the area of land that's needed to deliver it? So it's just far too woolly a statement to read from it about what will be delivered and what the obligation will be on the developer. And if, I spent some time looking back at the arguments for Siege Cross, and West Berkshire Council were very strong defenders at the time, saying that development could not come forward at Siege Cross because the council has no other means of funding for secondary school. That was the statement that he presented to the inspector at the Siege Cross inquiry. So, being a humble town councillor, I don't know what these funding mechanisms are, but all I can do is read what you have said previously yourself. There is no more money, and there's nothing in this infrastructure delivery plan that gives me any confidence that anything can possibly be delivered. There's uncertainty if the land is going to be delivered.
Siege Cross, it's the bottom half of the floor. It's part of the multi-stage. What I'd say is that those are all points. If you're looking for that additional level of certainty, again, consider putting those comments in as part of your responses. And if you think an additional level of certainty would comfort the house under work, so if you're saying it does happen, this is how you think you want it to work. That's what I see. Do that in, there'll be an inspection that considers it and takes it forward as part of the examination process. So again, we think there's sufficient flexibility in there to deliver that. I'm sure we'll be looking to have a discussion with developers and all developers leading up to examinations, the other inspectors and certainty as well. But if you want that certainty, you want that certainty spelled out within the policy, again, I would invite you to consider putting those response into that.
Thank you. Very much related. Again, these are documents that only came out on Friday nights, as far as I understand. But the viability assessment, which is all tied up with how much infrastructure the developers are going to contribute, the summary of the viability assessment is published, but the appendices, which actually say what the assumptions were, and what the methodology, that's yet to be published.
It is published now.
Oh, today is it?
Well, it's published. I checked before it came out.
Okay. Well, the appendices were published up until lunchtime. But let me just talk about the summary though. The summary refers to it being a viable project that meets the 17.5% or 20% profit thresholds. It says it could actually be, there's a surplus, you can actually seek more infrastructure and so forth. And it refers to with all the costs performed within the master plan by other people. Can you refer to, well, can you tell me what the costs are that it has assumed for secondary school? How does it approach the infrastructure costs? Did it take the £48 million number? Did it take the £26 million number? Was it taken was it not considered any costs in the viability study because it's allocated land?
Off the top of my head, because of all the various, the whole plan viability is to look at all the policies and see on the whole of do they impede the delivery of housing provision? They are not necessarily site specific, and they don't have to demonstrate that. They do have to demonstrate that everything is by and large viable, and I do know that the viability consultants have been in direct contact with the promoters of North East Thatcham to talk about the level of provision as set out in SP 17 and the whether or not it is viable. I would need to check to make sure that that is in the plan and in the various appendices.
Yeah, and I can see the appendix. It has been uploaded since lunchtime. So
Can I think with that, noting the time, we need probably to draw this to a close in certainly the next 15 minutes. I'm just wondering if there are any other topics other than those that people wish to ask questions on. Councillor Wooden put his hand, and I've noticed that Councillor Dillon has got one as well.
Only slightly different.
Okay.
A little while ago, we had, it may be speculation that Kennett School could be closed at some stage, and that land be sold to the developer to fund a brand new school. Thatcham. Is that still in the mix?
Enough me.
By yourself?
Yeah.
In terms of this local plan, the answer is no, Councillor Williams.
Chair, so the last area I promised was transport.
Yeah.
So I did have 3 questions. I don't know if that's acceptable.
Well, if you go and then Councillor Dillon has asked one, which may or not be the one that you. Sorry,
Councillor Dillon.
Okay, but yeah, I've got it on some WhatsApp anyway.
So I have 3 questions, and it refers to the phase 2 transport assessment, which was published on Friday. And the questions are related to rail crossing, Heath Lane, and again, that's the number of houses. So, but firstly, on the rail crossing, it states that the council is aware of local concern regards existing congestion and delays at rail crossing, and acknowledges it will get worse. But I don't see anything anywhere of any proposal of how it's going to resolve this, even in the 30-year vision, which is published alongside this. So, just broadly, if this is not addressed now with the largest ever development coming forward for West Berkshire Council, and it's not even considered in the 30-year vision, when will it be? It's just not the elephant in the room, so to speak, or the elephant at the crossing.
In terms of the work done to support this local plan, the local plan review, it has been established using the transport model that the development of 2,500 houses at North East Thatcham would not impact on the station crossing due to the work which would go. It would be addressed in the local transport plan. However, there are significant issues with the runway crossing. You can't go over, you can't go under, you can't go to the west. To the east, you have got an industrial estate, and you've also got another level crossing to the east with a signal box that contains all the information all the way down to Reading. So it would be hopefully addressed in the local transport.
But I have seen a detailed architect set of drawings for a bridge put forward by one of the developers.
Yeah, so have I, and they do not conform to regulations.
Okay.
So okay, so it's nothing really. Okay, if I can quote a sentence from the phase 2 assessment as well, because this one really concerns me, and honestly, I don't know if the text is incorrect or my interpretation, so I'll just read it out. So it's referring to Heath Lane, which one of the members of the committee, Heath Lane is the smaller lane which kind of connects Floral Way at one end to the other end. Tollway. And there's a small residential lane, really, which winds in and out of too many roundabouts, which isn't a great road for major access. And it's at one end it approaches Floral Way, which goes past Kingston Park down to Bay 4. And it says, in terms of Heath Lane, modelling highlighted that with the Thatcham development, traffic will be queuing eastbound onto Floral Way, caused by queues blocking back from the Floral Way roundabout with the A4. It goes on to say with mitigation, queues are reduced, and so forth. But Floral Way is over a mile in length. Is it really your understanding that this development is going to cause queues of a mile from Heath Lane down to the A4? And if so, how on earth is anybody going to get out of Dunstan Park? The assessment doesn't mention the exits from Dunstan Park or what's your roads, Sheffield Road or Simmons Field, whatever, all the lanes from Dunstan Park that feed onto Robert Lane. How are they going to do a right-hand turn if that is backing up from the A4 all the way up to Heath Lane? I just don't understand how that can work.
Jim, can I just add a point to that?
Well, can I have an answer first? I think,
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple answer is saying that would happen if there was no mitigation. So the answer to your question lies in what the mitigation will be proposed, and that would come through the planning application. I mean, even the local highway authority will not accept a proposal that, in their opinion, is unsafe. So when the proposals come forward with mitigation at that level of detail, it will be for the highway authority at that stage to decide. They are not going to allow safe development in terms of that access.
I'm only repeating, what's in the papers that's.
Can I just say, yeah, that if I recall, although that document only become public in the last few days, it's actually dated March, if I recall. Which would have given the highways, and it includes detailed scale drawings of the junctions and the mitigations, if I recall correctly. So why has the Highways Authority not looked at them already and formed a view before the local plan was published?
But the highway authority has said that it can be mitigated.
I'm not, because they're just quoting from the document that stage 2 study on. I don't think they've given a view, have they?
Well,
anyway,
Chairman, I was going to say, I find it a bit difficult to understand, is it mitigated or not? Because the study is done for 2,500 houses. The traffic assessment, the trip models and everything else that goes behind that methodology and assumptions are for 2,500 houses. So again, I'm just left working out, is this mitigation going to come forward? If so, when? What's the phasing of it? And is it dependent on 2,500 houses? Because the SQ17 is ambiguous, in my view. And does it require the 2,500 houses commitments to do the mitigation, or are we going to be left with 1,500 houses and a mile traffic queuing that full all the way around about?
So I think we need to be quite clear. The planning authority's position, the intent is for 1,000 houses to be allocated on that site. That's the intent. Examination seeking to secure an application. Assurance of that, again, what I said to you, invited you to consider to the inspector. Should the inspector agree to allocate the site, then the council agree to adopt the plan, that allocation. It's up to the developer then to implement the planning application, which would include a detailed transport assessment linked to the housing numbers. That is in turn then linked to the mitigation stage seeking to resolve them. So every junction which has an impact will need to have a mitigation strategy attached. That's the point. Talk about what specific mitigation are in terms of scheme at this level. It's a far more superficial, higher level assessment is done. The reason it's 2,500 because that reflects the management impact when we were talking about 2,500 in 2018 isn't precursor to 2,500 when we come forward next. That's the same argument to well ourselves engage with the inspector to try and ensure that's 1,000 people site. And that's what I'm inviting you, if you wish to. Yes, if you wish to, you need to get assurance that you need to inspect to have a work.
And just to be clear, I'm not promoting 2,500. But that's what we need supporting documents.
Clear. Yes, either of these.
Yeah. So it should be just you just guide me about how we should interpret a transport assessment that is updated to come out with the local plan, which is for 2,500 houses. Should we just ignore it? Because it's not relevant any longer, is it?
No, it's with Brian. Brian said it was they're all. The councillors more than 1,000 units on that site. The evidence that was developed in the 18 stage was at 2,500. That's the first case of that. Anything that comes forward with the next stage of the process of application should be as per the allocation to the inspector.
So it's just very helpful if everything was consistent. That's the appeal.
Yeah. And again, on that point, pages of evidence for this. But there will be inconsistencies across the evidence base. Key issue is the premise of the local plan review document itself. That's the one that sits at the top of the pile. It's 400-600 feet. So in terms of what we'll be asking the inspector to do a review on, he or she will have a review at this space. But the primary aspect of asking for a review is the content of the local plan review and the policies.
But would I be fair in saying then that the policy would be better if it was worded to say that SB 17 could have an upper limit of 1,500 houses, not a lower limit, which is what the policy states. That's the confusion.
As the town council, you are perfectly in your rights to do so. As a planning authority, we are bound by the NPPF, which turned around and said right at the start, housing cannot be a ceiling. And that is why there is this ambiguity on sites that says in the region of, or at least, because there will be changes. It is not an absolute. As I've already said about Somerford, the local authority was proposing 2,000 in the 16. It now says 1,500.
Okay, but when this plan was introduced to the full council, it was stated that there is a limit. It was stated that there was a limit. It was stated there was a limit as a new site and it's a smaller site of 1,500 houses. None of those statements are actually consistent with what you're saying to me. It's the same as Prohibition 18. There isn't a limit. And it's not smaller. Well, how can the statement that was made to full council be amended? It's a statement made by the Conservative administration that introduced it prior to votes at full council. Councillor's summary. So that statement was made in the public domain. The press has picked up on that. Yeah, the press went in November with a statement that housing allocation is reduced, and I think everybody would expect, certainly I would have expected, to go into the policy and find a clear definition that there's no more than 1,500 houses consistent with the statement that was made. And that statement doesn't reflect, in my view, what we're saying here. It's the same site. In fact, the rate of housing is increasing to 1,500, 1,250, and there's no ceiling, there's no cap whatsoever.
Well, again, I'd invite you, if you're looking for a certain time to engage with the examination process. To reflect documentation, with statements of common ground, various parties, doing the housing statement.
Housing background.
I think we need to draw this one very close.
Fundamentally,
Yeah.
Were they given the right information? People made the votes. People made the votes.
Can I ask another question about another site, which is the former bowling alley on Lower Way? And to do this, you have to look at page 1863 of the consultation statement for Regulation 18, where it says this site was not considered within the HELAR 2020 as it had not been submitted to the local authority. However, the site will be considered through the review of the HELAR as identified as THA 21. So the HELAR is still not yet published. And therefore, presumably, any councillor at the meeting on the 1st of December who hadn't got to page 1863 of this document would not be aware of the status of the site. Could you clarify?
The status of the site is in the functional floodplain, so it's automatically rolled out for consideration for housing.
That's not what the NPPF says, but well, I have to raise that one in.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you cannot. My understanding, is that site is in the functional floodplain, and it is therefore ruled out for development.
The current advert says it's a mixture of category 1, 2, and 3. But the NPPF, as I recall, says you have to have regards to the flood systems. It doesn't say it's categoric. Anyway, that's I think we'll need to follow that one offline probably in the response. Councillor Woodham.
Can I just very quickly ask for clarification? Councillor Lister mentioned the council assessment.
Yes.
That was published just recently. Was that for 1,500 homes?
It's for 2,500. Oh, sorry, 2,500.
Okay, I can understand your confusion.
Okay, anything else? I think at that point, I just want to make one personal observation that although the local plan is primarily developed by the planning policy team, it is a document of the council. I'm a little surprised at the number of times it's stated that other departments have to do things and they didn't do things in order to get information that's material for the plan, because I would have thought that that was part of the function of the council to produce a document which is the view of the council. But that's an observation, and I was expecting a response. One other final thing that I'm already having to start looking at responses. Obviously, the format of the response will come in the statement that you publish, but the format that I've seen, that there's a template published by the Planning Inspectorate, which asks for references to a particular policy or paragraph. And the question I would therefore ask, which you might not be able to answer in the statement, but be helpful if you could answer on social media or something, or if not now, is how do you address emissions? Because you're referring to something which is not an existing paragraph or policy.
Quite simply, if you go onto the objective system, it allows you to do that.
Okay. Right, so that will, okay, when that comes live, yeah.
You know, effectively, if there is an emission in a particular policy, there usually is a box for do you have any other comments?
Okay.
We were putting it in. If it was a mission in a chapter, for example, you go to that particular chapter, say for example transport, and say you have not considered X.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like the template is the word template that is available is incomplete. Thank you. So with that, I think we've reached at least I wouldn't say close, but we've probably reached as far as we can usefully get to this evening. And Councillor Dillon, he did send a comment, a question which Councillor Lister, I don't know if you knew, but he asked it on his behalf effectively. Okay. So thank you very much for that. I think you have given us hints on at least some of the things on which we're expecting to be developing text in the next 6 and a bit weeks. I think we're going to be quite busy. I suspect you're going to be quite busy as well, if not only then, but the period after that. So thank you very much for sparing the time this evening, and hopefully that doesn't delay you too long in getting the Regulation 19 formally underway. So thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome to stay.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to the second consultation by West Berkshire Council that we're discussing this evening. Slightly less profound.
I'll be dealing with item 5.
We're going back to item. That was item 5. Yeah, so we're going back to item 3 now. Thank you. So we'll approve the minutes of the meeting on 13th of this.
So proposed is a true and adequate rapport.
Thank you. Anyone who wish to second that? Thank you. Councillor Lister probably just about beach. So those in favour, thank you very much. That is so approved. Agenda item 4, matters arising from the previous meeting. Clark.
Only to say, I think there was some discussion around white lining as part of the response was received back by Councillor Williams, and I believe yourself and myself has seen it. Would you like to comment? Or
Yes,
yeah.
thank you. Following a number of surgeries last year, a number of people came up to us complaining really that the existing white line across Thatcham key areas needed reinstating, particularly in Thatcham Broadway, where it states in the road centre crossing, look left, look right, completely faded, and one or two folks there who use the mobility scooters, and there's an increased number, you'll notice. One lady told me that one or two cars had knocked the scooter drivers out because there was some confusion that hopefully the driver would give way and so on. So that's essential. We get that reinstated, look left, look right. You very kindly brought up, and others brought up, the fact that the no entry from the A4 into the high street almost disappeared, and cars were shooting off from the A4 strictly down the high street rather than going round the the Broadway, and particularly I mentioned the necessity to reinstate the lanes on the garden centre roundabout, because pedestrians crossing the roundabout, which is at the best of times very difficult, don't know whether cars are going up Tollway or going on the A4 into Thatcham. So we've had a response from West Berkshire Council Highway saying that they do intend carrying out the white lining, but I noticed they didn't say when. The other point I raised in email to them was, you'll notice if you're coming from Newbury towards the garden centre roundabout that the sign showing which lane to be in is lopsided, and it's been like it for several months. And I think that's rather poor. And the other point is that the shrubbery over the garden centre roundabout prevents pedestrians and other drivers seeing cars coming. And if you're a mobility scooter, I've seen them try to negotiate the roundabout with cars suddenly appearing through the hedges, shall we say, is extremely poor. I did add that to my email. So hopefully we'll see some positive reaction to make Thatcham in the key areas I mentioned safer for drivers and pedestrians. Thank you.
Can I just give a little addition to that? So good news and a disappointment.
Oh.
So the good news is that just before Christmas, I sort of observed contractors repainting the markings at the bus stop at the bottom of Hennick Lane and the arrow on the hump there. The disappointment is that 75 metres up the road there is another hump with a completely faded arrow, and they didn't paint that.
Well, there we are. Says it all.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's probably anything else to raise. Thank you. So I think if we note those points and then move on to, we've already dealt with agenda item 5.
Mr. Chairman, item, if I may raise a point, is item 5 says we have to consider a response to local plan review. Well, I thought that was the purpose of in that item, so we pulled together.
No, it says
our comments
in preparation for the council to consider its response. I think it's a sentence. So that was part of the preparation process.
So we're going to get something together in order to submit by the 17th of February.
So yeah, well, it won't be the 17th of February now, because it will be 6 weeks after whatever date it starts. It hasn't started yet. It's been postponed. So that date was correct at the time of publishing the agenda. It's no longer correct.
I see it's open ended. We don't know the new
We
date.
don't know it is. No.
What's the next step?
Okay, so the next step is that.
Pull together.
So there was an announcement by the clerk, and I thought it went out on WhatsApp to all members, I think, saying that we had called an extraordinary meeting of full council on the 13th of February to consider our response. Okay, anyway, you now know. So 13th of February. Now that was on the assumption that it would finish on the 17th of February. And our next Planning and Highways meeting is not until the following Tuesday. So the delay means, firstly, that date is slightly earlier in the process, and secondly, that it's almost certain that the Planning and Highways meeting will be before the final deadline. So my expectation, and this is just a personal view at the moment, is that we will keep that meeting of full council, and that will agree a stable draft. And then we have the option at the Planning and Highways meeting to refine it and deal with annexes and things like that. On the
full meeting on the 13th.
So full meeting of full council on the 13th of February. It was the 13th, wasn't it? Yeah. Followed by the option, almost certainly, of the 20th of February for Planning and Highways to do the final tidying up. There won't be anything of substance. And of course, we have a meeting on the 31st of January of Planning and Highways, where we'll be able to give a progress report and possibly bring in some of the key topics. But there are so many topics that will need to be addressed in our response that I don't think everything will be ready by then. Councillor Woodhams.
Can I have your opinion? The officers mentioned that if you wanted to make any comments, then they should be made to the inspector.
Yeah. No.
Would not normally we make the comments to the officers?
No.
So that they can be collated?
No. Well, they collate it, but they collate it as an editorial task. But the comments we are making are addressed to the inspector at this point. The council cannot take any action on them, other than just the one action that they can take is to decide on the basis of the comments received that the plan is not mature enough for submission. But they cannot change what is out for consultation.
there appear to be a number of loose ends that I would have thought that, you know, one would have approached the officers and then the loose ends would have been tied up, then it would have been tidier, more coordinated at the time that the inspector would consider these.
That I'm afraid is not the legislation.
Mm.
But of course, had the document been more mature at the time of the Regulation 19 consultation, the need for that would have been less. Okay. So yeah, so we at this stage we have Councillor Lister and myself have been reading various documents. My guess is that the total documentation so far is approaching 10,000 pages, 10,000 sides, of which one document has 3,318. Thankfully, you can word search the things you need to find. And also, thankfully, a lot of it deals with other parts of the district and topics that we probably don't need to go into too much detail about. But there is a vast amount of paperwork to read.
Can we thank you for your research, which has assisted in our
Okay.
view of the page?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just in advance, or have you done it?
Sorry.
Is this in advance, or have you done it all?
Well, of course, some of it was available in December, so we've been working through it. Yes. But unfortunately, quite often it cross-references things that aren't yet available and so on.
Yeah, can I just
Yeah.
I mean, it has the delays not helped because the process up till now has been there were high-level papers for full council were presented to full council on the 1st of September. In my view, the statement that went with that introduction was incorrect. It wasn't consistent with the policy as it's written. Nevertheless, that went to full council. The high-level policy document was published then, on the 1st of December. Since then, what's happened is that supplementary information evidence documents have been provided. When the consultation was due to start last Friday, some new information was uploaded onto the information portal, but not everything. And as you heard from Brian, it's all just early documents which are being uploaded as we speak, which makes it very difficult to review everything because you're trying to review a document only to find that an appendix has been updated, which is more information. So it's a very difficult process to keep on going back and working out what new information has appeared. But when the consultation goes live, at that point, all the documentation will be valuable and stable. I'd say we're probably about 95% of the way there in terms of the documents being uploaded. One or two documents that remain, mostly they're all available now.
Okay. Thank you. So noting the time, if we go on to Lawrence's Lane Prohibition of Motor Vehicles consultation, slightly more focused geographically. If we okay, a quick history here. So this was when the COVID first struck, and there was an announcement by the government of active travel consultations. The town council raised the possibility of Lawrence's Lane being included. There then, spring last year, in the second round of consultation on the second round of active travel measures, it was proposed in general terms that it should be that some traffic restrictions should be implemented, and that led to something called an experimental traffic regulation order, which came into force on the 19th of July for a 6-month period, which expires on the 19th of January. And that's it is possible to make comments at any time during that duration, but it made sense for the town council to wait until the end of that period to comment. And this is something that I've written, particularly in discussion with Councillor Lister, as with the guidance from the last meeting of Planning and Highways, to support the continuation of the TRO, traffic regulation audit, and effectively making it a permanent one. So that is my introduction to this document.
Would it be appropriate for me to say the votes?
I was going to wait briefly to see if there were any comments before we did that. Councillor
Yes, well,
Crumbly.
you're waiting for me to come forward, but
Yeah.
Chairman. Well, I was well. 2 points, I suppose. The bollards have been put up, have disappeared, or they've been reinstated. We find out what's happened to them, and if they're going to be reinstated again, I guess they better be put forward in a different form to ensure they're not going to be removed once more, and the taxpayer having to pay for further replacements.
I think that the bollards is a separate issue because they were part of this experimental order. They need not be part of it. There's no requirement for the council to put bollards in to implement such as a regulation. It was put in because people were ignoring it, and I suspect they were ignoring it because they were using sat-nav, and therefore that will, over time, hopefully the companies will remove Lawrence's Lane from their database. So that may mean that the bollards are not needed anymore.
Okay, if I may just sort of continue, I've been opposed to this, as you all know. Perhaps any comments you make would say there's a minority view that this road should be kept open as a possible relief road if Caldash Hill and the road to the other end, its name escapes me, should closed, so that it's there, maybe going just in one direction as a relief road if it should be necessary.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's appropriate to put in a minority view to make a decision. I was going to say that on the specific points,
Put my own view.
certainly put your own view. There's no restriction on any councillors putting in individual views. There's 2 points there that if it was needed as a relief road, firstly, that this TRO does not prevent the council from making use of it if the need arose. But if it was going to be a relief road, it would definitely need to be one direction, because if there was any significant traffic, there would be a complete gridlock if people tried to use it in both. Therefore, there would need to be some temporary signage in any case. So I think that the legislation does take account of that possibility should the need arise.
Okay.
Chairman, I'd be happy to propose the constitution of the plans.
I think I'll give Councillor Woodens the honour as he put his hand up. So Councillor Woodens proposed, Councillor Mr. seconded. Any further comments?
If I could just speak to it, just very briefly, I did receive some feedback from the residents who live in that local area. They drew my attention to something which I wasn't aware of. There was a fatality on that lane in the 1980s between a vehicle going up and either a cyclist or a motorcyclist going down. So again, there's further evidence, tragically, if that was ever needed, but it just shows how potentially there is serious safety issue there.
Okay. So those in favour of putting this document forward as proposed, and those against. So this is carried. Thank you. So we then move on to the inquiry. So just to say there, the adjournment, not only received notification of the adjournment, but this afternoon we received notification of the dates of the adjourned hearing, which is the 1st of February and is it
The 8th to the 10th of March.
8th and the 8th to the 10th of March. With the 8th to 10th of March, which is all to do with the availability of rooms and experts and council officers at a shorter notice. And that goes.
You'll be there?
I will be there, yes, and that will be in the council offices, West Berkshire council offices.
What's your feeling about how it's going so far?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it, but the point is that we've only heard a third of the evidence. We received very belatedly the amended drainage report, which at least recognises that water flows downhill. I'm not entirely convinced about all of the other elements of it. But I don't think there will be a need for any further submissions in writing on that topic before that's addressed. As to the rest of it, we'll just have to wait and see what the relevant experts say.
Do you think West Berkshire Council are fighting hard enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
I propose no.
Thank you. Thank you. I will second that, and those in favour of noting that topic. Thank you. Land adjacent to Little Copse, Lawrence's Lane. A popular topic. Right, so we have in the full pack, we have the the document describing the experimental TRO, the format for the response, some drawings, the drawings show bollards which are not correct. They show 4 bollards at each end. In fact, there was 2 at the top end and 1 at the north and 1 at the south end were installed later on. And has been said that the bases are still present, but the bollards are not. Location unknown. So then we have is there a document for? So we've already submitted our response, haven't we?
So that was the objection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've already submitted an objection. What I've got here is that I did some further research on this. Sorry, Little Copse. I'm getting confused here. Little Copse. So we have already made an objection to this one. In the normal, fairly concise format. What I didn't realise at the time was that this has been submitted under a new government scheme called First Homes, which, in summary or very briefly, enables developers to put forward sites for first homes, which is what it says, outside of the settlement boundary. They still have to meet other planning criteria. Yes. And that was, we hadn't noted that point in our response. So I did quite a lot of research and wrote this document, which is this submission, which is, I think, 5-6 pages long. I believe that it's going to be called in for a hearing by Eastern Area Planning. And therefore, I would be grateful if you could endorse this response, say that you agree with its conclusions, so that I can then cite this as part of, or whoever is speaking for the town council at that planning hearing of Eastern Area Planning will be able to cite the additional points in this as part of the council's view.
Substantially, it sounds like pretty good what we've done so far. But the first part, how is that defined? We're talking caravans.
No, this is it's homes with, there has to be a discount below market price. There has to be a condition in the deeds that is carried forward in and it's only available to people for a first home, and there's a maximum price on that, and that condition has to be carried forward to any subsequent purchaser through a deed on the house.
Yes, is it freehold property or is this letting up to them?
This is freehold. It's for purchase.
Purchase.
Yeah,
So
if it's
the first time buyers
it has.
buying it.
Yes. So the point here is that this is, and at the moment, this planning application is purely related to the only condition. They're only requesting permission for access, and therefore the comments here relate to the issues of access from Lawrence's Lane.
The access, right, as you said, it's from Lawrence's Lane, not through Southend.
The application is the application is for access from Lawrence's Lane, and that is all they're requesting at the moment, and that's all that this basically is addressing.
It's management process.
Yes, I don't know who that is.
Sorry, that's why I need to say.
Yeah.
Chairman, I've read this. Bear in mind that I didn't realise at the time that it was so focused on the entrance from Lawrence's Lane. My point was that we make sure this is called in if there's any prospect of being accepted. Ask Lee Dillon or somebody else from the local councils to make sure that to call it in.
My understanding is that Lee Dillon has spoken to Councillor Pask, and Councillor Lee Dillon has spoken to Councillor Pask, and it has been agreed that it will be called in.
If there's any prospect of
if it's going to be prospect of it getting granted, and I think the main reason for that is that this is the first case that this has come forward, and therefore that it's appropriate for councillors to consider the principle. But anyway, if you can agree to endorse what was the wording of on the agenda,
I propose item number 8, your writings on your objectives. I support that.
So if you can agree to endorse these comments, and then that can be part of the any submission to the Eastern Area Planning meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work.
And we move on to what was normally the meat of the meeting, but is now hopefully a brief closing item. So planning applications. We have 2 planning applications. Can I suggest that we basically treat them together. So that is two proposals for installing of solar voltaic equipment on industrial units in Colthrock Estate. So it appears that one of them is an application and one of them is an application if prior approval is required, which we don't explicitly need to comment on because it's a legal matter, but I think we can. And one is 1.6 kilowatts and the other is, I think, 740 kilowatts. So they're substantial. Does anybody, in fact, there it is, that's Harrods, as you can see, that is a pretty large building, pretty large roof. And Xtrac is there and almost as large roof. Perhaps Xtrac is more efficient because it's pointing south. Can I suggest that, does anybody need to see any more information before we reach a decision on this? No. Given that this is very much in line with the requirement of local authority, a proposal in second to support this, these two proposals, and that is unanimous that we support these. Thank you very much. And I'll tell the member of the public after the meeting what we've just decided. Moving on to item number 3, smaller but potentially more needing greater scrutiny, perhaps is the phrase.
Right, so just find my paperwork. Stapled one. Right, so we have proposal for 15 Golding Close. Is proposed for a 2-storey side extension and associated alterations. So it's this property here. They're looking to go to the side of the property. This is the existing car parking space. It is currently a 1-bedroom property. It's the end of a terrace of 5, I believe. And they are looking to extend to the side to form a dining room, and then to the rear of the dining room, move the stairs from where they currently are to the rear, reconfiguring the upstairs and putting in a new bedroom to create a second bedroom. So that's what they're planning on doing. I'll show you where they are. So Golding Close. It's this property here. I don't know whether members recall, we did actually discuss another property with an application a couple of weeks, I think, previous. So yeah, 2-storey extension to the side of this property. They currently, sorry, whizzing you about, it's difficult to see. They currently have access to the rear of the property through a gate there. And there's provision for 1 parking space. However, Highways did come back saying that they would be looking to see further space because it's going up to the second driveway space to comply with policy, because it's going up to a 2-bedroom property.
Last question about rear access. I'm a great fan of rear access, and as your Willie bin or your green bin to and fro, and also that's going to be closed off.
Going back to the plan, it looks quite tight there.
But given that it's in a terrace, the adjacent property does not have rear access either.
I agree, we don't need
to frontage line.
No.
Potential problem. It can be avoided.
Looks so slightly having green bins and.
Hmm.
stuff in front of the house.
Yeah, the one got, you can see they've got the bins at the side of the fence there. Just,
Yeah.
Getting dizzy.
So that's good.
Yeah. Mm.
I guess.
Well, the gravel path is going to become the second driveway.
It'd still be space for the bins there anyway, though. But, once they get to the back of the garden for.
How do you
You
check?
might say that the neighbouring houses can't either because it's a terrace.
I can't determine whether they have any access around here.
And I'm terrace houses, I don't.
It might be.
Possibly.
Around the back.
But that might be these ones.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, doesn't it? I think.
Chairman, could I propose to raise no objections?
And I propose slightly modify that to no objection, provided the parking issue, the concerns of highways on parking are addressed.
Accepted.
Those in favour of making no objection with that condition? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So we then have a second.
Okay, so I'll fit this one here. So this application is for a proposed double-storey side extension on a semi-detached property on a corner plot. There was a single-storey extension in 2017 that would provide a bedroom and a cloakroom with rear access to the rear with a ramp for a wheelchair. So that was in 2017. So it currently sits on the corner here. It's this plot.
So it's in fact
Yeah.
it's in fact no longer a semi. Because
Oh, no, 'cause it's
an extra house has been added onto that is actually a separate property that's been added onto
Yeah.
the other side.
but
I
that's
know it's well.
that's at a double-storey extension.
It's not an extension, it's a new property there.
And it's on the
Sorry,
corner.
the applicant property.
No, so the
No.
point is that it was a semi, but it's now been the opposite side has had a similar size of extension, but instead of being an extension, that is a new
Separate house.
separate house.
But that's not the house.
No.
No.
We're looking at the left hand side.
So if I just go back to what's proposed, so this is the existing.
Mm.
And this is the proposed beneath. Can you see that okay? Yeah. So at the moment, there's a garage on the ground floor, the bathroom, kitchen, and lounge and living room here, and just 3 bedrooms to the upstairs. And they're proposing to make this a kitchen, dining, a living room, a lounge, and then it says bedroom with a wardrobe and ensuite. So this is the existing elevations, and this is the proposed elevation. Now, there have been 3 representations on this property. So there were a number of concerns raised. There's one impartial, one objector supporter, and one objector to it. All 3 draw attention to the fact that the property is being used as a HMO and will be converted to be an HMO. House of multiple occupancy. So they've said that there's at least 4 people living in the property, and there are highlighted concerns that with the extension there would be more, and that it's on the corner, parking issues, and at the moment there's not sufficient. They've got issues with waste, as there's not sufficient refuse areas for all occupants to put their rubbish. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Another one just noted that the plans seem to be incorrect. So of the existing plan, it shows 2 rear-facing bedrooms, but apparently one has been converted into a small shower room, and a waste pipe coming out. So the floor plan produced is incorrect. So.
Okay. Can I just go back to the photograph,
Mhm.
because I noticed that this is not subservient.
Mhm.
I was just interested in what the opposite side is. So the opposite side is
Working with this today.
Yeah.
It's trying to emulate the others.
Yeah, the point is that if the opposite side is not subservient, I don't think we could justify insisting it on, because then it would make it asymmetrical.
Because the other side looks quite good.
Hmm.
You can see it's been extended, but I don't find it bad in planning
Yeah.
terms.
Because the drawing actually makes it look balanced in terms of the roof line.
The drawing was only showing half; it didn't show the opposite property. One half.
Okay, we have a look at the other side from the street, please. The subject property. So,
And David, this one first one we have to be concerned about ignore. If you zoom up a bit, briefly, yes.
There's a large plot.
So,
How many parking spaces are allowed?
it currently states that it's a 3-bedroom property, and then they're looking to add another one, so that's 4 bedrooms, isn't it? Don't believe anything would come through from highways at that. Oh, hang on a second. Highways at the time had no objection, although the highways comments were returned before any representations were listed on the website.
But there's been no access to the rear as we had with the last property. Although it looks as if it looks on the plans there as if
No, I think if you look at
really?
cross, you zoom to the left, I think there is a gate showing on.
there's a garage.
That's the garage. So no, it's the proposed ground layout has enough space for a gate. Well, if you go to the left, then I assume that
Yeah.
the dotted line's a boundary. I see what they mean about HMO. It's unusual to have a WC off a lounge. Anyway, and a bathroom on the ground floor
hang
as
on.
well.
Yeah, so that's been
A proposed ground floor, we have, that's an interesting point, we have four bathrooms in this property, 4 bathroom type things. You've got a bathroom there, and an ensuite there, a bathroom on the ground floor, and a WC. Do we want to support this then?
Can we just ask, Chair, when we're considering the planning application changing the actual physical building,
Yes.
to what extent do we have to take into account the current occupancy?
Not in terms of occupancy, but the point is that the layout seems to be inconsistent with the claimed. How many bathrooms how many bedrooms were there on the first floor? So there's 1, 2, 3. It's got 3 bedrooms on the. Yeah.
So it doesn't say any on the ground floor.
No.
It's got 1, 2, 3 on the top floor.
Yeah.
That was a bedroom, which says it shows its current, says it's existing as a bedroom. But they're converting that to a bathroom.
Yeah.
Well, can I say
Yeah.
I don't like it. I think as the objectors or commentators have said, it's turning into a property in multiple occupation. I don't know if there are any special planning considerations, but I can see this leading to all kinds of problems. My feeling is to object to it and then perhaps add on reasons afterwards.
I was going to suggest that we ask the council to consider whether the disposition of rooms, in particularly bathrooms, is consistent with the claimed arrangement of rooms in the application. As part of their consideration of the application. It's not something that's a legal question, planning question that's been on answer, but we ask them to consider whether that is the case and also that no objection is conditional, would be conditional on satisfactory arrangements for parking for the number of people that is believed to be resident.
Sometimes you get that point across by wrapping it up in an objection. So
Yeah, the problem is it's difficult to object on things that we don't know about. It's objection. No objection condition. It'd be no objection conditional on the
Chairman,
Yeah.
therefore, will it be useful to raise no objection subject to your comments?
Yes. Yes, thank you. So those points of the parking and the review by the council of the distribution of rooms.
do you vote for?
Those in favour, I think the proposal and second are those in favour of that. Thank you. And at this point, I think I have to ask again. Sorry. Okay, those against, one against. So, okay. Thank you. So it's still approved. Sorry, I'm trying to sort of expedite things. I think at this point I do have to ask if we can continue after 9 o'clock. I think it'll only be for a short period. Okay. Thank you. Those in favour, thank you. Well, and as you're against, that's carried. We'll hopefully not be that much after. So we have one more planning application, Oak Tree Road.
Yep. Right, Oak Tree Road. So this application is here. It's a conversion of a garage and extension to front, side and rear. However, although it's not stated, it's a 2-storey extension, which we previously considered as a part retrospective 2-storey side extension in October. It was refused by West Berkshire Council, and I can give you details on what we objected on. Do you want that now? Or?
Well, the question is it significantly different?
No, not overly. So if I might jog your memory and show it to you. It's this property here. So they had approval to convert the garage and an extension to the front and rear, but was not considered by Thatcham Town Council because it was a single storey. Then it came before us as a part retrospective application for a 2-storey side extension following the demolition of the garage and single storey front and rear extensions. That was refused. And then it's coming back before us, and we'll show you the differences. So So this is the existing floor plan with the dining and the sitting room and the garage to here, 3 bedrooms. And then they plan to extend above, down here, multi-use space, shower room, and utility. I think that remains the same as the previous application, and then the alterations to the top, where previously I think this came forward. They had previously got a ensuite and a dressing room. They've removed the dressing room and put the ensuite to the rear of the property. I think it was to the front of the property previously. So that's the existing. And that's the proposed front and the proposed rear. And side elevations. Previous application.
Sorry, is this the previous?
This is the previous one, and the difference that I can see is literally that this ensuite has been moved to the back.
Is a new extension or a new application subservient to the main body? And what to do with the earlier version?
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the previous one. And this is the current one. So that's more.
That's the current one.
That's the current proposal.
Looking from
Yes.
the front or the back?
Looking. That's looking from the
Can you see the building?
to the rear.
Can you have a look at the
Oh,
front?
actually, no, actually, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the front, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies. Sorry, want to look at the.
I just asked you why the previous application was refused.
Yeah.
Right.
So Thatcham objected on the grounds that had the application come before the committee in its entirety, the committee would have objected to the complete proposal due to overdevelopment and lack of access to the rear of the property. Given that the ground floor had already been approved, Thatcham Town Council object to the first floor extension on the grounds of overdevelopment of the site. Lack of adequate parking, as 2 of the spaces would not be accessible with the 3rd parking space occupied, and therefore the spaces would not be used in the appropriate manner. West Berkshire Council refused on the following grounds. The proposed first floor side extension, due to its form, scale, bulk and siting, would appear as an overly dominant element when viewed from the rear kitchen window of the neighbouring property. The proximity of the new solid brick wall would cause a severe and unacceptable overbearing visual impact to the neighbouring amenity. The proposed development therefore represents an unneighbourly form of development that would unacceptably harm the residential amenity of the occupants of the neighbouring property, contrary to the provisions of national planning policy framework and various policies.
Wouldn't that still apply now?
I can't see much different.
Yeah.
All they've done is taken the front wing back out.
Yeah, and
Actually,
I looked there was something about sightline, which is presumably related to the kitchen, but that wasn't the reasons we objected.
I think it's the rear wall that they've taken
Right.
back, isn't it? Because that's the rear,
Mm.
and they've taken that back so that I presume,
Yeah.
the adjacent
I
kitchen.
don't think that's material for the reasons that we objected before. So can I propose that we restate the same objections? Yeah, as in favour, thank you. That's agreed unanimously. Then one that we don't need to consider, unless there have been any, I think that's outside the parish anyway, so. To move on. Yeah. No, agenda item 10, planning matters. Anything that's has arisen?
No, nothing for me, Chairman.
11, agenda item 11.
Nothing from me, Chairman.
I think just mentioned briefly in passing, for the purposes of tonight, the removal of the orcas from the A4.
Yay.
Thank you. That's an agreement by acclamation, I think.
Let's swim away.
So then we move on to decision notices.
decision notices are as follows. So Kennet School applied for the removal of condition 3 of the zero carbon with a previously approved application. Thatcham Town Council rejected, and West Berkshire Council also refused the condition being removed. And then we have one for Longcroft Road that was not considered by ourselves. It was for determination of a prior approval, and they've refused it.
But that still means that they can submit the application. It just
Yeah.
hasn't.
Yeah, so they will have to submit an application.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I think thank you very much.
Mhm.
It's concluded. Reports from town council appointees to outside bodies. Councillor Lillicrop, do you have anything to report?
Only briefly, Chair, to say that the SWMP and Thatcham Flood Forum met last week, and it was an opportunity for the officer at West Berks, who's now managing the flood programme, to meet with the forum, but also with some stakeholders at the Memorial Trust. And a press release will be going out shortly to let residents know that work on the north and east projects will be starting later this month. That's the public consultation exercise for the final stage, the memorial project, will be taking place in the summer with a view to work starting in 2024.
Okay. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our agenda. So thank you very much. The meeting is therefore closed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Oh, it seems to have played out on me anyway.
All right.
Or maybe that was. I hope that hasn't. I hope that saved it.
Benefit. It's it was going to provide loads of gosh to have the infrastructure.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, one moment. Can I just,